Hello, lovely humans. Hello. So I've been a little bit absent from this space, but I'm committed, I'm back, and yeah, I was just navigating a lot that came up with all those eclipses and moving houses, and yeah, I needed to just save some of my energy for myself. But I'm back and I am very excited to be sharing with you guys today. I want to share my journey with anxiety and how I have been able to heal almost fully my anxious tendencies and my daily experience of anxiety, because it really was a daily experience that pretty much affected every single aspect of my life. And since doing the inner work, confronting the parts of myself that I didn't want to look at, I have really been able to deeply understand my anxiety, the roots of my anxiety, and create more compassion for myself ultimately. And so today I really want to share my journey with you guys and just share some tips and tools and tricks that have really helped me to heal my anxiety, whereas now I only experience it on an occasional basis in stressful situations, So I pretty much had anxiety, I think, for almost my whole life. I was a very anxious child. I used to get extremely anxious when leaving the house. So I would as soon as we had to go to school or whatever we had to do, I would just run around. My mom used to call me a headless chicken because I would just run around and be like, what if I forgot this? What if I forgot that? Run to that room, looking for anything that may bring me some stability, some grounding, some comfort. And still to this day, I can get kind of anxious when I don't feel like I have enough things that are mine and surround me. But I've really learned to resource that grounding from within rather than placing that in external objects, things, people, places, whatever it may be, so that I've created that home within myself. Okay. I used to experience anxiety as a child a lot. It was very crippling. I wasn't even sure I was conscious of what anxiety actually was before maybe the age of 15, I'd say. Mental health awareness wasn't a thing when I was in high school and when I was growing up. And that's only happened within the last, let's say, maybe 5 to 8 years or so. Mental health awareness was not a thing when I was growing up. And I didn't even know what anxiety was. I didn't know what depression was. My experience of anxiety was very below the surface because I was experiencing symptoms of anxiety on a daily basis. But, a lot of people in my life just thought that was just who I was, and I also was no, that's just who I am, And so this happens basically when we have mental health issues that become normalized. They just become accepted because they become part of who people see you as, right? And they really start to form the foundation of your identity. And that's why healing is such a huge death process, because we have to kind of separate who are we naturally versus who are we when we are triggered, who are we with our trauma, and who are we without our trauma, okay? And that process causes a lot of pain because you have based so much of your identity on this challenge or on this mental health challenge that you deal with. In my case, it was anxiety. You know, people just thought that I was just always like that, you know, so it really wasn't brought to my awareness, other than my mom kind of like mentioning it to me a few times. And in that time, I was such a rebellious teenager, you know, I would always like shrug off everything she said because I didn't want to take it to heart. And that was just the rebellious side of me, you know. I experienced deep anxiety, especially in matric. I was so anxious I used to have what's called performance anxiety, which is when you get anxious when you have to do something that's like going to be marked or judged by other people. So I would get performance anxiety around tests. Even if I knew the work, I would always like do really badly in tests because I knew I was being judged. Okay, I would get performance anxiety when I had to give orals, when I had to stand up on stage, when I had to speak in front of a crowd, you know, all these situations where the entire attention of the room was placed on me. That would give me huge amounts of anxiety. And still to this day, I don't really enjoy being the center of attention, but that's something obviously I've worked with, and I'm learning to heal through putting myself in situations that do make me feel uncomfortable, you know, because I feel like that's where our growth is, you know, the uncomfort or the uncomfortable feelings are actually guiding us to our edges and to where our growth lies. Okay. I experienced probably the worst anxiety of my life. Probably in about matric, so 2015, and then in 2019 I had my spiritual awakening, which is a topic I still want to make a whole video on because it's an entire thing in itself. But yeah, in 2019 I had my spiritual awakening and also went through a personal health crisis, which was huge. And so after the operation, I actually was in such a deep state of disconnection from my body, such a deep state of disconnection from my mental health, that I actually started experiencing social anxiety for the first time. And this was really crazy because I never ever, even though I was a very anxious person, I never ever experienced social anxiety. It was the only thing that I was like sorted on, you know. And so when I started to experience social anxiety for the first time in my life at the age of 22, I knew something was deeply wrong. Something was deeply disconnected within my being. And so since then, I've been on this deep healing journey to connect back to my internal self, to get to know who I am on the inside, you know, and to really reconnect what had been lost before. Okay, so it is and always, the healing journey is always a process. It's never something that happens instantly. Unfortunately, we live in a culture that demands instant gratification, but that isn't what the nature of the healing journey is. It's always like you grow a little bit and then you come back a little bit and you grow a little bit and then you go back a little bit and you grow a little bit more. So it's always kind of that like 5 steps forward, 2 steps back kind of a journey. And we must never shame ourselves if we think that we've gone backwards, you know, if the mind perceives that we've gone backwards, because that's not true. You know, it's not possible to go backwards in your healing journey. Okay, it is possible to repeat old patterns and repeat patterns from a wounded place, but it's not possible to go backwards. And so we must always remember this, because sometimes our mind perceives healing as this very linear journey, you know, like that, whereas actually the healing journey is up and down and sideways and squiggles and all over the place and like swirly here and then like up again and then down again and then up here and then down here. Like, it's crazy, you know, and every person's healing journey is going to look different than anyone else's. You know, your healing journey is uniquely yours. And so the more you embrace that idea, the more you can stop shaming yourself for, you know, having setbacks or seeing yourself repeat old patterns that you thought you had already healed, you know, or moved past, you know. And that's just your subconscious's way of asking you to go deeper, right? To go deeper into this, because you clearly haven't fully healed it in the way that you thought you had, you know. And this is where the intelligence of the body comes through, because our mind has all these like rational and linear conceptions of how things need to be, but actually it is the wisdom of the body that is calibrated to truth, that is calibrated to what is real in this moment, in this present moment. Okay, so yeah, let me get on with how I healed my anxiety. So first of all, I had to stop denying that I had anxiety. This was huge for me, because I used to, like I said before, my mom would say, you have anxiety, you have this, you have that. And I always used to take it as like a label or an insult, and would just be like, no, that's not me. You know, don't try and put these labels on me. And that was hard, because I had to really, really dig deep and be like, right, like, fuck, like, I need to start identifying myself with the word anxiety, because this is actually what is going on, you know, like there's no other way to describe it. Okay, so that was huge for me. Once I stopped denying that I had anxiety, that I experienced anxiety, let's say, I had to stop demonizing my experience of anxiety. So every time I would get anxious, there's obviously a part of me that is angry at myself for being anxious in the first place, right? And so that is what I had to stop doing. I had to stop demonizing my own experience of anxiety. I had to stop shaming myself, okay? I also stopped trying to be normal. This was huge for me. I always used to feel so like I wasn't normal for having anxiety. I used to feel so like isolated and alienated and weird and strange and broken. You know, I used to feel so broken for having anxiety, because I never heard anyone talking about anxiety. I never, like I said before, mental health awareness wasn't a thing when I was growing up. Okay, we didn't have all these, like, now in my feed, every second post is like how to deal with anxiety, understanding your anxiety, understanding mental health, la 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 la. Like, none of that existed when I was growing up. None of that existed. Like, I honestly didn't know that anxiety was a common thing. I thought I was the only one, and so I used to feel really, really alone in my experience of my anxiety. And I think that is because it's become so much more normalized and naturalized through social media, which is like such a beautiful, you know, beautiful growth in social media's ability to make people feel less alone. You know, that's why I see so much power in it. So yeah, I didn't even know that anxiety was a common thing, okay? So I had to stop trying to be normal, okay, whatever the fuck that means. Okay, the next thing is that when I went off the pill in 2019, I honestly felt so much relief in so many aspects of my life. I'd been on the pill for 7 years. And one of the first things I noticed when coming off the pill and my experiences of before and after was that my anxiety lowered about, I'd say 40%, as much as 40 to 50%. Like, coming off the pill, reacclimating to my body's natural hormones, having natural cycles, you know, experiencing the connection to this lower part of my body, my womb, pelvic area, you know, like experiencing just an energetic connection, a conscious connection to that lower half of my body. really, really helped me to ground down into my body and feel more centered, feel more grounded, feel more stable, right? Because this lower half of our body is where our lower chakras exist, and the lower chakras, their function is to ground us into the body, into the physicality of being a human, and connect us to our earthly environment, to the earth, to our environment. So coming off the pill helped me lower my anxiety. I'm going to say about 40 to 50%. It was that much that I noticed that. Okay. So and you hear this all the time, people suffering with anxiety and depression as a result of being on hormonal birth control pills. So it wasn't a surprise. I just, at the time of being on the pill, I didn't know that anxiety and depression were a symptom of being on the pill, because yet again, I didn't have the information. I didn't have the resources that social media gives to people nowadays with so much mental health awareness, I didn't have that. So that was a huge, huge, huge change for me. The next thing was that I started doing yoga regularly. So what yoga does, it really helps to connect the mind to the body. And so through the breath, we start to sync our minds with our body. And so we start to become more in tune, with our body and with ourselves. We start to become more embodied in our own being, right? So yoga really helped me to, first of all, move all my energy from my mind into the body and start to align my mind with my body. It helped me to also learn how to sync my breath with movement, which also really helps to allow you to come to a more focused state of being. Okay. And again, coupled with yoga, I started to learn how to meditate and how to control and control my breath. And therefore, through the breath, you are able to control your thoughts. You are able to control your mind. You are able to slow down your thoughts, slow down your heartbeat, right? Because anxiety it's not something that is just made up in the brain. It is a psychosomatic, I don't want to say disease, but because that's quite negative, but it is it has a psychosomatic effect. Okay, let me say that. It has a psychosomatic effect, meaning that it starts in the mind, but the mind is so powerful that it starts influencing the body, right? And so anxiety is not just a mental thing. It's also like that heart beating fast in your chest, and like sweaty palms, and like feeling like you can't breathe, shortness of breath, all these physical experiences of anxiety, right? And so meditation really, really helped me learn, first of all, how to slow down my thoughts, because obviously, with anxiety, you deal with a lot of racing thoughts. You deal with a lot of overthinking. Every single situation, you overthink it like a million times. And that it's really, really hard, like every single little thing, to overthink that and have that play out in your brain again and again and again. It's really, really crippling, and it makes you not present. It makes you distracted. It makes you preoccupied with what's going on in your brain, instead of being present in the body, present with your environment, present with the people that you're spending time with. Okay. So meditation really, really helped me to become present, and also start to develop that witness consciousness. Okay. So the witness consciousness is something that we develop through mindfulness-based practices, such as yoga, such as meditation. And it allows us to basically take our consciousness and step our consciousness outside of our self, right? It sounds quite weird, but it allows us to observe our thoughts, observe our feelings, observe what is going on internally for us from a place of non-judgment. That is what the witness consciousness is all about. It is about being able to observe your internal state of being and be able to have more compassion for it, because you can see what is going on from a greater perception, right? You can see the whole picture now rather than just seeing the tiny little aspects of it, you know, because when we are so in our problems, we become really lost and confused because they take up our entire awareness. They consume our entire they consume all of our attention. And so when we are in that space of like, I don't know what to do, I don't know where to turn, like who's going to guide me, like what can I do, what decisions must I make, like looking all over, you know, we get lost, right? We get lost in what is going on. We get lost in the story of what our brain is playing out. And so developing the witness consciousness, which is one of the main benefits of yoga and meditation and other mindfulness-based practices, is to develop that witness consciousness so that you can step yourself outside of your problems. You can step yourself outside of your challenges and look at them through new eyes, through a new lens, through a fresh perspective, okay? And so developing this witness consciousness is the first step to healing, because it allows you to see parts of yourself that you may have previously shamed or judged or just suppressed, you know, not having the compassion and self-awareness to lovingly look at these negative patterns, to lovingly look at these destructive behaviors that you may be unconsciously repeating, okay? So this witness consciousness is a huge part of healing and seeing your anxiety as something that doesn't happen to you, right? Because often we can feel like a victim to these mental health challenges. We can feel like, why am I the only one with anxiety, you know? Or like, why am I the only one that is experiencing this in this moment, you know? And we can feel so helpless and so weak when it comes to dealing with these mental health challenges when they first arise, you know? We often ask, why is this happening to me? Why do I have to have anxiety? Like all these questions, you know? And unfortunately, those questions just take us further and further and further away from finding the answers, right? So developing that witness consciousness is a huge step, because you can finally look at what is going on without judging yourself, without hating yourself, without, just thinking that you are broken, you know? Okay. And then I also started, through that witness consciousness, I started journaling on a really deep level. And I would journal my feelings and I would get it all out onto paper, and all that overthinking that was happening, I would journal that. And as soon as I put those overwhelming thoughts onto paper, they started to dissipate, right? Because I honestly felt, it's like when you speak to someone about something and you feel lighter afterwards, you know, because you've been able to share the load, share the burden. That is what journaling does. It really helps us to feel like we can look at what is going on for us from that place of love, from that place of compassion, from that place of understanding, you know. And then just rereading what you have journaled is such a beautiful way to get to understand yourself on a deeper level, you know, because you're reading your journal from the witness consciousness point of view, you know, but you wrote it from the from the confused, like lost, whatever point of view, you know. So it really helps you to step outside of yourself and get to know yourself on a deeper level, because, you know, maybe what comes through in your journal are things that you didn't even know about yourself, or feelings that you didn't even know you had, you know. So journaling is a huge and very powerful tool. And so what I would do is every time anxiety attack came through, or a panic attack, or every time I had some sort of reactive anxious outburst, I would journal about it. And I would just kind of, through the journaling process, start to unpack it and like kind of separate, like, okay, that is clearly a trigger from that person, and that is clearly an insecurity that I hold because of this. And, you know, it allows you to kind of like create a mental mind map, and get to the root of like, why did this happen this way? Why am I feeling this way? Why do I hold these insecurities, judgments, whatever inside of me? Okay, so that is a really powerful process to reflect on difficult situations, reflect on experiences in which you feel regret or shame or judgment towards. Okay, and then again, after this journaling process, I had to stop shaming myself for experiencing these panic attacks, these anxiety driven outbursts, these reactive mechanisms. You know, I had to stop shaming myself, because I learned that anxiety is just your nervous system's way of protecting you. It's your nervous system's way of alerting you to something that isn't right, something that is out of alignment, something that is not serving your highest potential, okay? And once you stop shaming yourself for having those reactive episodes, then you can start learning, because a brain in shame cannot learn. And this is another huge concept that changed my life, because I really realized, right, if I want to grow, if I want to stop being this way, I need to first stop shaming myself, because I cannot learn if I am blocked by shame. Okay, and that is just a fundamental concept that we need to realize as humans. You know, the brain is so fucking clever, and it protects us, and it puts these protective mechanisms in place so that we don't have to confront things, but actually we do, you know. And so that's why it is so much easier to heal from a place of deep self-love, deep self-compassion, rather than judgment and shame. Okay, I'll say it again: a shamed brain cannot learn. And then I started making my embodiment practices my medicine, okay? Speaking of medicine, I never went on long-term antipsychotics, but I did get this once-off pill called Stress-Am that my mom got for me, and it's quite a low dose, but it's just really amazing to kind of, it stops all like the physical overthinking, like overwhelm feelings in your body. And so whenever I had a panic attack or an anxiety attack, or I was in traffic or something like that, and I would feel that anxiety start to rise, I would be able to use this pill as support. But saying that, like, I didn't use it maybe more than once a week. I just carried it in my handbag to have that extra support if and when I needed it, you know. And sometimes that would be in the middle of traffic, and randomly like some car cuts me off, and like I feel that anxiety, and then that's a really amazing way to like help you just calm your center. But yeah, that wasn't something I overly relied on, okay? I actually personally found the best external form of medicine was actually marijuana, weed, ganja, whatever you want to call it. I actually found marijuana was a really amazing way to help me heal my anxiety, because what often happens is if we are activated, if our nervous system is activated, we are going into that fight or flight state. And from that state, we are very, very activated. We're very aggressive. We're angry. We like full up armor on, right? And so we start protecting ourselves. And so we actually start to embody this very masculine, protective, like hard, strong, like no one can get to me kind of like energy, right? And so that is obviously useful if you're in a situation where you need to be protected or where you need to protect yourself, but it's not useful in a situation where you're surrounded by family and friends who love you and are trying to gently help you, right? And so what I was able to do using marijuana and smoking marijuana was it just allowed me to kind of like relax and just feel more present in my body. It would allow me to just kind of, turn off that overthinking drive. That's what I really found weed helped me with. And so everyone's experience of using marijuana is different. And I'm just speaking about my personal experience, which was that marijuana really helped me to disconnect from that anxious tendency to overthink. It would make me more present in my body during a time where I didn't even know what it was like to be present in my body. Okay, it was like the only relief that I found from that mental overstimulation. And so it really like taught me how to soften. It taught me how to be in my body. It taught me how to come back into my feminine and just start to create a better relationship with my feminine, sensational, feeling body, right? Because I found that when I smoked, I would be very sensitive to touch, to sensations, to emotions, to anything that wanted to come up, and so marijuana really, really was for me personally a huge, huge healing tool in my journey of healing my anxiety. Okay, so I was speaking about making embodiment was also my medicine, and I already spoke about yoga and meditation, but embodiment is more than just that. Embodiment is about how do you embody who you are on a daily basis. It's like, how connected are you to the sensations that arise for you? How connected are you to your body? How connected are you to your self-expression? How connected are you to just what is going on within your body, right? And for so long, most of my energy was stuck in my mental facility. So I had very little embodied awareness. And so that was something I needed to cultivate. That was something I had to learn through embodiment practices, through self-pleasure practices, through yoga, through dance, ecstatic dance, free dance, even dancing when I went clubbing, like all these different ways of getting into your body and experiencing yourself through the body, not through the mind, okay? Because basically I see anxiety as this imbalance of energy. And so I see it like our energy when we feel anxious is stuck here. It's in the higher chakras. It's stuck in this mental facility, this mental space, right? And so in order to balance that, we're not trying to get rid of it. We're trying to balance it so that it can be neutralized, right? So in order to neutralize an excess of mental energy, we need to bring that energy down into the body and ground it into the lower chakras, which is like this half of the body, right? And so how do we bring energy from up here down here is through embodiment. It's through practices. It's through spending time in your body, connecting with your body, whether that's through exercise or through hiking or through yoga or through breath work or through, there's so many tools. I can't list them all. Self-pleasure is another one. Like, there's so many tools in which you can experience yourself through your body and not through your mind. Unfortunately, we just live in a culture that really values mental capabilities over physical and bodily capabilities. Our culture, it values the mental over the emotional, right? But the thing is, anxiety, like I was saying, it has a psychosomatic effect. And yes, we can heal it through the mind, but anxiety is actually emotions and feelings that come up in the body, and our body doesn't know what to do with it, so it sends it all to the mind, and then our mind doesn't know what to do with it, so we blurt it out, we project it at others. At least this is what I was doing. Other people may internalize it and then have like a panic attack on the inside, but then look completely normal from the outside. You know, this is called high functioning anxiety. When people have anxiety, but they seem to be doing pretty well, they can look after themselves, they can go through life looking and seeming pretty normal, when in reality their internal world is completely messed up and completely disconnected from what it looks like on the outside. Okay, so embodiment is a huge piece, right? It is learning. Embodiment teaches us to balance our energy and move our energy, our conscious awareness, from the mind into the body. It teaches us how to do that through practical tools. Okay, it also teaches us how to regulate our nervous system, especially yoga, meditation, and breath work. It teaches us how to self-regulate. Yoga is one of the biggest teachers of this, is how to self-regulate, okay? And so most of us weren't taught how to self-regulate as children, okay? Because what happens is, as you're a kid, your nervous system is attached to your parents' nervous system, attached to your mother's nervous system, okay? And so if you grew up with a mother or father or parental figure that did not know how to self-regulate, and unfortunately, still to this day, most adults do not know how to self-regulate, because nervous system education is not common. It's not taught in schools even to this day, you know, so it's something that wasn't really spoken about. Okay, so if you were a child that grew up with a parent that didn't know how to self-regulate, you were mirrored this state of dysregulation. They mirrored to you, this is how you behave when things go wrong, or this is how you behave in a state of crisis, or this is how you behave when XYZ happens, okay? And so we actually, as kids, we learn from observing the actions of others. We learn from watching. And we don't learn from what we are told. We learn through the embodiment process of, monkey see, monkey do. Like that is how we learn as children. And so if we grew up around a parent that was very volatile, or very overly expressive, or would project their emotions onto others, and obviously we don't understand this mentally, but our bodies learn this through energy and through emotions, okay? Our bodies are so much more energetically tuned than we realize, right? So our bodies calibrate to the energies around us, especially as children. We don't know how to self-source. We don't know how to self-calibrate our own energy field. So we look to others for inspiration, for, how to teach us how to do that, basically. So if you grew up with a parent that was volatile, overly emotional, projects their emotions instead of taking responsibility for their emotions, that creates anxiety, because we grow up having a dysregulated nervous system. We grow up not knowing how to self-regulate, okay? So all our And so our regulation gets based on these external factors. It gets based on everything happening in the perfect way in my day, you know? And on the flip side, this actually is just bringing up the idea that I actually used to struggle a lot with perfectionism. And I think perfectionism is actually I think it's a sub characteristic of anxiety, right? Because if things didn't happen perfectly as I wanted them to, first of all, I would freak out about that. And then I would get anxiety about things being unstable, about things changing, right? And so as children, we are taught to place our trust in external things, in external experiences, in external events, in external people, right? And so when someone or life or the universe or an event doesn't go to plan and we get let down, we make it about ourselves, right? We make it about it's our fault. It's like, how could we do this, you know? And so we really internalize a lot of what goes wrong, and that lack of control creates so much anxiety. Like, I don't know if what I'm saying is resonating with anyone. I would love to hear your experiences of anxiety in the chat. But yeah, wow, it's been, I think, yeah, I've been here on the healing journey for about 6-7 years now, and only in the last 2-3 years have I felt like I've been able to manage my anxiety. I've been able to learn how to deal with it, okay? Because anxiety isn't something that's just going to go away. You can't outthink your anxiety. You need to get to the root of it, which is stored in your body. It is stored in your nervous system, okay? Your anxiety is as a result of your body not feeling safe. Your anxiety is as a result of your nervous system being dysregulated because of a trigger, okay? And so the more we learn to self-regulate through mindfulness-based practices, the more we can start to return that self-trust, the more we can start to feel grounded in our body and feel like we can rely on our own internal connection to keep us safe, okay? Because we don't live in a safe world. We live in a very unsafe world, and we get reminded of this unsafety on an almost daily basis. And so that's why I wrote my course, Root and Reboot, because it's all about your relationship with yourself, okay? How strong do you feel in your relationships to yourself? How supported do you make yourself feel? How do you support yourself? How do you show up for yourself? How do you care for yourself? Are you putting other people's needs over your own? Or are you putting your needs first? Is the need of your inner child more important than others? And if you answer no, then of course you're going to be dealing with anxiety, okay? Because anxiety is the body's way of letting you know what is going on. It's your body's way of alerting you to danger, to a problem, to a misalignment in your life, okay? And so when we get to the root of that, we can really heal so much faster and more efficiently than if we, only focus on fixing the mental, and that's why like things like therapy and affirmations and all these mental based practices are really good and powerful, but they're not the entire picture, okay? I have been in therapy for probably the last 3 or 4 years, and I only started seeing the results in my life, in my healing journey, kind of when I started doing yoga and when I started my embodiment journey, okay? Because healing the mind is directly linked to healing your relationship with your body. You know, we can't just separate them. And this is what the Western medical system does. It divides the body into parts and then says like, oh, you've got a problem with your brain, that's a brain issue. Oh, you've got a problem with your stomach, that's a stomach issue, you know. And we isolate the problem, but we forget in that process that the body is one entire system. And so one issue in one place could be related to everything else, you know. It could be related to so many different, like, there's so many different ways that your health issues are related, you know. And you're even just to your mental state, to your emotional state, to your spiritual connection to yourself. All of these things are linked, you know, the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. We cannot separate them because they are all linked. And so each impacts each other, okay? We cannot just look at things in isolation. And this is what I call holistic healing. Holistic healing is about embracing all of you, looking at everything in your life, starting with your diet, then going on to the people you surround yourself with, then going on to the thoughts that you are having, then going on to your exercise, and so on and so on and so on, you know. Like, holistic healing is about getting to the root of the issue, where unfortunately we live in a society that only focuses on treating the symptoms, okay? Things like antipsychotics, things like surgery, all these Western medical interventions, they are just band-aids onto issues that usually have a root much deeper down, okay? They usually have roots in childhood trauma, in childhood issues, in learning disabilities, in, you know, there's so many like root issues that we're not allowing ourselves to look at because we are convinced by the Western medical system that, oh no, it's just a head issue, or oh no, it's just this issue, okay? And so that actually, it really limits us in our ability to self-heal and be self-healers, because we are so, like I was speaking about earlier, our focus isn't on the whole picture. It is only on a tiny fragment of what is going on, okay? And so we're not going to be able to heal fully if we are just treating the symptoms, okay? If we are just treating the surface level expression of that disease, mental health issue, challenge, whatever you are facing right now. And then I flipped my view of anxiety. So this is another thing. I had to start seeing my anxiety in a different light. I had to start reframing my anxiety, okay? And so what I started to do is I started to see, okay, like clearly my anxiety has this whole list of negative symptoms. Let me see if I can look and write the positive list of symptoms, right? And so one of the first things I started reframing was that anxiety is not a curse. Anxiety is my superpower, okay? I really started to look at how is anxiety my superpower. And so this may sound completely contradictory to those of you watching, but it really is powerful to start looking at how can you look at things that challenge you in a different light, okay? So with me seeing my anxiety as a superpower, what does that look like? So that was like me seeing, okay, well, I have this level of very, very, very sensitive awareness, right? I'm very sensitive to sounds. I'm very sensitive to smells. I'm very sensitive to all my senses are very, very sensitive, except my eyes. But, yeah, all my senses are very sensitive. And so that means, like, yes, that means that I struggle to go to sleep sometimes, and that, you know, other people can fall asleep a lot quicker than I can. But that means that I have this like extra spidey sense, you know, like I felt like my anxiety was actually the foundation of developing my intuition, because I was so like sensitive. I was so like easily, like I could hear things other people couldn't hear. I could see patterns that other people couldn't see. I could notice things that were a lot below the surface, okay? Because your anxiety becomes like this watchdog, okay? And if you hear any sound, you're lying in bed, you're trying to sleep, you're like, okay, I'm just gonna go to bed now. And then you hear like a creak and you're like, what's that? You know, and then you hear like a bang and you're like, what's that? You know, and it's like, yes, that is like very annoying when you're trying to go to sleep. But when you're living your life, you know, like it actually allows for this sensitivity that most people do not have, okay? And so it allowed me to see my anxiety as a superpower. It allowed me to see how is my anxiety working for me, right? When it is in balance, when my nervous system is in balance, how is this trait of mine that I perceive and society perceives as negative and unproductive, how can I actually reframe that, you know? And so I chose to see it as a superpower, you know, because I was a lot more sensitive. I was able to pick up on things that other people weren't, you know. I was able to sense, like even with my eyes closed, you know, I was able to sense energy more strongly. I was able to sense like feelings and emotions, you know, and that also taps into being an empath, you know, that taps into having this very empathic nature. You know, you can always tell like who's the saddest person in a room. You can always tell like who's having a great time, who's not. You can always tell who's suppressing, who's not, you know. And this actually allows me to have a deeper insight, not only into myself, but also into the people that I surround myself with, you know. And so it allowed me to really pick up on things that weren't being said with the mind and with the voice, but they were said through the body. They were spoken in non-verbal communication, basically. Like my anxiety allowed my non-verbal communication radar, if that makes sense, to be more sensitive and be more like to get practice in that, okay? So yeah, this whole live is really just showing you how we can reframe these mental health issues that we face. You know, how can we stop shaming ourselves and loving ourselves for what we struggle with, okay? Because what we struggle with, like our challenges, are actually our biggest teachers, you know, like our triggers are also our biggest teachers. And so the more intimate I became with my anxiety, the more I was able to be present when I was triggered, you know. And so like they say that the space between when you have anxiety, it's like situation, so it goes trigger, situation, trigger, reaction, right? And these just come like straight after each other and you just like react. Or at least that was my experience, okay? But what I started to do is, because I started to develop this bodily self-awareness, I was able to feel emotions arise and just like sit with them, you know, and just like come into connection with them, and just to be like placing my hand on my heart and like being like, I feel so like tight in my chest and like my throat is closing and I feel short of breath, and like, you know, and I started to recognize, okay, these are my trigger signs. These are my trigger symptoms. And so how can I be with that intimately and hold myself intimately? Because really it's about our inner child in those moments needing to feel safe. And so it's like, how can I in this moment make myself feel safe again, you know? And in that way, you start to become more intimate with the sensations that go on within your internal world. And in that way, you start to prolong the time between trigger and reaction. And so instead of trigger reaction, it goes trigger response, okay? And when we are responding instead of reacting to life, we can actually respond in a way that is much more authentic to who we actually are, right? To who we are without the anxiety, okay? And so that it seems like such a tiny thing, but the more space that you can create between the trigger and the response, or the trigger and the reaction, the more you can prolong that time of response / reaction, the greater self-awareness you can actually start to cultivate, because you are able to just be with yourself and be like, okay, I feel all of this. Where's it coming from? Like, I feel all of this. Why am I so triggered? You know, and you're able to, in that moment, actually start processing rather than waiting for the entire thing to play itself out and then only like a day later journaling about it and being like, why was I so triggered? La la la. Why was I so reactive? La la la. You know, you can actually in that moment start to integrate, in that moment start to process your own triggers, and in that moment start to get to know yourself on this deeper level. And so that is really where I see mental health healing is really about getting to know yourself on a deeper level, so that we're not reacting from these unconscious, subconscious, childhood traumatized places. We're actually responding from the mature, integrated, regulated adults that we are, right? You know, instead of reacting from this very childlike, immature, very victimized place of being, you know, and we can actually start to respond from this more empowered state of being. Okay. So I really hope that you all have enjoyed this chat on how I healed my anxiety. I've really enjoyed it. And if you guys have any questions or comments about how you experience anxiety, please leave them below. I would love to hear all about your experience. Maybe it's similar to mine, maybe it's different to mine. Let's connect more. Let's talk about these things more, because I'm not the only one that experiences anxiety. And I'm not the first and I'm not the last. So let's make it normal to talk about these things, okay? And now that now to this day, like, I only really experience anxiety if I'm like deeply, deeply triggered, or if I feel deeply out of control. But those things only come about when I'm not meditating, not doing yoga, not doing breath work, not journaling, not exercising, not looking after myself, you know? So like, now that I actually do all of those things on a regular daily basis, I barely ever get triggered. I barely ever have those intense, overwhelming experiences of anxiety anymore, because I'm so much more aware of how can I prevent that from happening, right? Prevention is better than cure, okay? And so I see self-care as like this revolutionary way to prevent so many of the modern diseases and mental health challenges that plague us, okay? Sending you all so much love and light. And if you would like to connect with me on your healing journey, your anxiety journey, please message me, DM me, drop a comment. I would love to connect more with you guys about this. Mwah.